Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, hooray!
That's what I was
That is
doing.
awesome. I was like, what is the...
That's so
I was so
exciting.
confused.
Oh my goodness. How
Love you
far along
guys.
are you? Congrats.
Right now.
Give me a hug.
Oh,
Aw.
that makes way more sense because when
Yes.
you said it'll be a fun time, I'm like, I
Right.
think they're overestimating our marriage.
No, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Sorry,
So
how far
great.
along?
I'm between 11 and 12 weeks right
Great.
now.
Oh, that's great.
So
Very, very
August 3rd.
good. Okay.
That's made my day.
You
Yeah.
been feeling okay?
Yeah, better the past like week or two, but I was
You have been
definitely,
feeling crappy.
yeah, I felt very fatigued, tired, and nauseous, very nauseous. I'll be in the middle of eating, and then I like couldn't eat it anymore because but it's been getting better.
Good. Well, that's good.
Wait, and y'all have known for a while? Like the other night when everybody
Yeah,
was
I
here?
would
were
have
you-
known by then.
We've known for a long time. It's been eating us alive.
Ah!
Yeah.
The night before hunting season.
Yeah.
Black
That's
Friday.
better.
Yeah.
Black Friday is when
Okay.
we found out.
Oh,
Because I
so
remember,
it's
I
been
feel
a
like we
minute.
told our family at like 6 weeks, so it was like not really that, like,
We
best window of time to tell people what.
we told our parents and siblings on Christmas Day
Nice.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
because
great.
I was going to try, like, he wanted to wait until we had an ultrasound to tell everybody, and I was like, I can't, like, they're going to catch on, because
Yeah.
I've been feeling really
Right,
crappy
right.
and being, like, Debbie Downer, and
Yeah.
so
Oh,
I was like, they're going to
August.
figure it out, and then it won't even be fun to,
Right.
like, tell them, because they'll already know.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Yeah.
Wait, so have you had an ultrasound at this point now?
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. Last Monday? Last
I
Monday.
think so, yeah.
Do you go, where are you going to go?
We just went to Geisinger.
Yeah,
We
so
went
you
to the clinic and for the ultrasound, and then we have another appointment at the hospital on like the end of this month. So,
You said August the 3rd? Is that what?
Yeah.
Is the current date? That's great.
Yep.
I'm so happy
So
for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's why we were being so secretive about
Right,
the
yeah, I was
podcast.
so
I'm like,
confused.
well, I mean, when you asked me before about topics, I think I said like marriage or parenting. So it took me a second there. I was like, okay, parenting, got it. Yep,
Yeah,
I told
he's
her I
ready
could
to
talk
roll.
about parenting.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
great.
But now it matters more to you, you know, because
Yeah.
I even
Yeah.
was thinking, how many of your listeners are like really like ready to go with like, oh, I need some parenting advice, you know, which
Yeah.
I guess it'll be more soon.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think too, like, I wish at some level I would have thought more about what I could have done to prepare to be a better parent, like, way before, you know what I mean? But, that's great.
Yeah.
So you also, like, this isn't just like a surprise, Matt, you also have questions, like, actual questions about parenting?
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
a couple. We wanted it to be more like
yeah.
conversational.
No, that's
but
great.
yeah, we do
That's
have
great.
some questions.
Yeah. Lord help us all, it's a good thing you have Ing here for this.
Yeah, that's why I said we have to have Ing as well
Right.
on this one. We wanted you both to be
Yeah.
on for it. So.
Yeah, that's good.
My kids have a line that says something like, "You're a good parent because you're really fun." And I say to Enid, "Why do you think I'm so fun?" And she said, "Because you let us go on the roof." So
On the roof.
yeah, so that's why I should probably
Our kids can't go on the roof. We have solar panels.
yeah. Well, there you go. Okay,
There you
so
go.
props on. It was a carport roof. It wasn't the house roof, in case anyone. Yeah. So
So, do you want to start off with a question?
I can, yeah. This is probably more for Luke. How can I best lead my family to be followers of Jesus and just represent faith as a new father in a very secular world, I guess?
yeah, that's a great question. One of the lines that I find myself saying a lot when I'm talking about just parenting and kids and that kind of stuff is like, most likely the biggest influence on your kids is that they're going to grow up to be a lot like whatever you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's, books you can read or parenting techniques or tricks or that kind of stuff, but like the more Brody you focus on becoming the healthiest version of Brody that God intends for you, that will trickle down and influence, Fern and the kids more. And it also helps, in my opinion, to eliminate some of the issues with hypocrisy. And like I've seen instances, I know plenty of instances, I won't obviously share like details or whatever, but like of kids who grow up and they're like anti-Christianity because they'll say something like, well, my parents always said X, Y, and Z, but they actually acted like, these other things and that represented things differently. And so I think living with humility and authenticity and being focusing on your own relationship with God and what He's growing in you authentically is a better way than saying like, oh, you know, I'm going to be a parent now, so I need to like act like this way in front of my kids, because automatically then that is an inauthentic way of acting, you know. And then one other thing that I try to do, Ingrid and I both try to do, and who knows, our kids are not, as I always tell people, like, our kids are not old enough to know like 100% how they're going to end up, so I don't, and not that, you know, there's obviously things at play other than just our parenting in their future, but for me, I just want to say I'm sorry and like have the humility to like apologize to my kids. You guys both know that we talked in premarital counseling about what I think of as like the enacting the gospel in your life, where in a couple you say like, I'm sorry, I forgive you, that kind of thing. And I think kids can withstand a lot of challenging things if the adults that are raising them can apologize humbly for what they've done that's wrong. And especially when it gets to older parents with older adult children, so many times where a lot of issues could be simply solved by like, even, hey, I'm sorry that I was like this when you were a kid. But it's really hard for adults, particularly with kids, to do that. So that's my input on it, as if like I am the guy you're talking to, but I don't know if you have any thoughts. Like, you're probably watching things and more observant about some of that than I am, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to land on the typical answer, but an additional part of it is that, like, the kids see Luke reading his Bible, and we pray often, especially not at meal and bedtime. So, you know, like, I think both of us will oftentimes just stop and be like, well, then let's pray about this, you know, or let's talk to God and ask Him to help us with this situation. And we definitely have, like, different iterations of trying to do Bible memorization or reading together as a family. So I think just like having it as a part of our life that's not just on a Sunday morning or like just right before bed and meals pray. And I'd pray with the kids on the way to school about like real things, you know, like I'll tell them like, hey, you know, Mommy and Potty need you to pray and ask God to help us with these things, and you know, what can we ask Him to or like what can we praise Him for this week, and like just make it like an everyday part of life is like talking to God, you know, and knowing what's in the Bible, you know. And I mean, the kids can probably quote us both on Bible verses that we just try to say a lot that are specifically helpful to them, you know. So, yeah, that's just another part of it too.
Playing off that, like I try to stay relatively aware of news and just like things that are happening in the world. I don't go crazy like watch, you know, the news every day for 10 hours, but one of the things I really try to do is like either at the table or when we're driving or whatever, bring up some event and then like talk about it in connection to Christianity, because I want them to like explore and ask questions around like, how does my faith like influence kind of whether it's, you know, political positions or whether it's you know, how to feel about, you know, some dynamic that's happening in the world or other countries or that kind of stuff. I just feel like it's the same thing. I'm just saying in a different way the same thing I'm saying, which is like combine their real life with God instead of separate that out and be like, there's a book, I can't think of the title of it right now, but it talks about how like sometimes parents just like give over to the church like the Christian education. Like, I'll teach my kid how to like play sports and get dressed and, you know, whatever, but you know, the Christian stuff, like they'll go to youth group or they'll go to whatever for that. And I just think that's like one of the worst things we can do, because it kind of says like that's not actually important in the parent's life to pass that on to the kids. So, there you go. That's our answers.
Kind of piggybacking off that, and you kind of already said about it, but I don't know if you want to add anything. I had like fun ways to incorporate like prayer and Bible study into daily family life.
Yeah.
Like,
I think
Ing is definitely better at this than I.
Well, I don't know about that. I just spend more time with the kids, you know. So it just the sheer volume of time together, we definitely have a lot more. So yeah, just to reiterate with the prayer, I definitely make prayer for myself personally as well, just a lot more like on the go, you know. Like if we'll see we're in the path of the life flights, and so anytime we see one, now we're just in the habit of stopping and to ask God for that person to survive. if the kids are fighting or if I'm even having a tension with them, I'll literally sometimes just stop and be like, all right, we are falling apart. We need to stop and ask God to help us in this situation. Who wants to talk to him first? Or, do you want me to? And we'll do that. And definitely I think our time for thankfulness, because I always hate that prayer is just like an emphasis on asking for help. I like to focus on the praise part of prayer is on our way to school. We just kind of go through lots of different things we can be thankful for that day or week. Praise and music is probably the biggest way that we incorporate that, the kids and I, because I don't actually listen to like Christian radio stations, but we have a lot of different good artists, especially Slugs and Bugs, which Luke just mentioned in the email this week. That this artist, he's just a genius. He does like any genre of music, so it's actually enjoyable for adults too. Like, I really like his music, and he puts straight scripture to song. So once the kids, by now we have 4 CDs, and there's like probably 15 to 20 songs on each one. And sometimes it's passages. And at this point, I'm sure Audrey has the whole thing memorized, so at least 100 Bible verses, basically, she knows in song. And that really, truly does help. Like, even for me, like, I was just saying to Abe the other day something about, why do I have to do this so good? Not every little thing matters. And I started singing, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart. That's working for the Lord and not for men. And so that kind of thing happens often, where it's like the scripture that's fitting in the song, like we'll like just say like, okay, here's a song that's great for this situation, and that the kids for sure I think know God's word through song because it's so much catchier that way. Yeah. And I think like Luke does a good job of trying to head up Bible reading a little bit more, but different times, like Autumn and I will pick a different part of the Bible to read together, especially more when she was younger. And kind of, this summer we did a whole Bible verse thing that I guess the kids like kind of did almost better than we did, but
that's exactly right.
sadly. But yeah, I think just talking about the Bible as if it is like truly a manual for life of, okay, well, and like especially at the younger ages, because that's when you can catch them young, and then it's normal for them to be like, how can God help us with this? What Bible story is similar to this predicament that we're in right now, And there's almost always going to be something that the kids could understand and relate to, like, oh, okay.
I think one of the things that's awesome about kids is they love stories, So we are big proponents of, it's called the Jesus Storybook Bible, which we started at Kish to give out, like we do child dedication, like instead of giving like a kid's Bible, which is complex and in my opinion don't always get read as often or that kind of thing. The way the Jesus Storybook Bible is, it's written so that all the stories kind of whisper the name of Jesus and like point to Jesus. And I would, like, I don't know how many times we read through a lot of that stuff with each of the kids, and it gave them like a really significant foundation with like not just the stories in the Bible, which is important, but also how they connect to like the bigger story of the Bible. And so I just think that's like a really awesome like foundational place to start. And then I would add to that even like, we're admittedly really dorky and like comfortable in our oddities here in our house, but like we just like to like the idea of reading, And so I think in some places, like you tell people and kids to read their Bible, but it's like you also like, if you're not a giant proponent of the act of reading, then it feels kind of like it's like two things. So we just read a bunch, including kind of particularly the Jesus Storybook Bible, but also other.
Yeah, there's another one called, I think, The Biggest Story.
Yeah, right.
But it's super known for its art, which I love. The colors, I mean, it literally looks like our living room carpet here. But, like, Enid will be like, Mommy, read me this. Let's look at this. Like, she actually likes how it looks, so we ended up reading just because it's, like, actually good Bibles instead of...
Yeah, and so I think I read years ago something like, have your kids, one of the best things you can do with kids is have them be bathed in the stories of the scriptures, So it's like, as adults sometimes we're like, oh, Genesis is just like, what does this have to do with my life? It's all these random stories. But like, if kids grow up experiencing that story, then all of a sudden they feel like they live in the world of the story, the big story that is the Bible. And it doesn't seem like it's far of a jump versus like, just approaching them with kind of like more of a, as Christians we do this, and then it can, in my opinion, lead a little bit more to some of the legalism stuff instead of like, oh, the story of the Bible is actually the story of the world. I'm just part of it, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe you also said, what was the question, like interesting and fun or something like that? What exactly was it?
I wrote, my wording was fun ways to incorporate prayer and Bible study into daily family life.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I think that really talking about the Bible, like I sometimes hate even the word calling it like a story and characters because it feels like it's like somewhat not true, you know, like all this. But I think talking about the people in the Bible, like they really lived, and you are similar to them, and like I do feel like both Luke and I end up talking to the kids a lot about like if they're discouraged or think they messed up, it's like, oh well, you're in great company with all of the people in all the New Testament, you know, and just talking about whatever they did, fit it into one of those characters that, you know, they can just feel like, yeah, this is like a historical person that I'm learning about, just like Lincoln or, you know, whoever. So.
Yeah, this is not exactly related to your question because you're like, I heard the word fun in there, but just thinking about like making life fun for them. So one of the things I remember telling Pastor Doug, my predecessor at church, this once, like one of our visions for our family, or like hopes I think for our family, is like we don't want to just be like, I don't know, technically good people, like everyone in our family is doing the right thing, but we want to like genuinely like enjoy being together and like enjoy other people. And I think the gospel, like I mean the story, the truth of the Bible is what makes that possible, is like we can have forgiveness, so we can apologize, and then like you can actually have better relationships if you have these mechanisms that allow for forgiveness and allow for, you know, and Ingrid, I would be the first to say, like, by no means at all are our kids like always angelically interacting with each other, but we kind of like, you know, try to work through those things towards like this vision of like, we want us to joyfully be together. And like God wants that, instead of making like the spiritual life or Christian life be like, you know, you just always need to be better, do better, that kind of thing, only without the grace part.
How can I best show my love / patience to my family in like hard times, you know, if we get angry at each other, or maybe if there's sadness, if we lost another family member or something, just how can I best show my love and patience? And because it can be, I mean, from what I hear, you can get pretty impatient quick with kids. So.
Sure.
I kind of have a start to an answer because I don't have an answer, which is, I think that yes, there should be some effort to direct you how you, I guess, convey your feelings to your kids in a way that's not like screaming at them constantly. Like that's definitely a huge thing. But another part of it is I think you can just like be real in front of them too. Like I think you can very much say like, I'm losing my patience with you right now, or you know, I need to step out because I am going to scream at the top of my lungs if I don't, or you know, I don't know, or I'm just feeling really too sad to talk about this right now, so we just have to come back to this later. Just kind of instead of thinking like, okay, how can I portray myself to look to my kids the right way, maybe better mindset is just kind of like be yourself in front of your kids, and then be ready for that apology later, you know, like, hey, I'm really sorry that I screamed at the top of my lungs at you after all, you know, or that I hit the table really hard when really I'm mad at something at work and not at you.
That was for me, in case any of the
That's
listeners
not happening to be a real life example, but
yeah, hypothetically.
if you slam the table really hard because you're mad at work instead of your kid.
Whoops, Daisy.
Yeah. So anyway, I think obviously Luke can probably answer too. Is, you know.
Yeah, I think as I like to repeat on this podcast, and for both of you especially, like, just really appreciate the question. One of the things that I think about a lot is like, sometimes in interacting with people, they'll say like, I don't want to cry, or I don't want to process this kind of thing in front of my kids because I don't want them to like, you know, I don't know, feel sad or like get messed up by my emotions or something like that. And I can kind of picture where that comes from in a way. Like, we don't need kids to, like, you know, be more mature than adults in a way. But one of the ways I've learned to think about that is, like I said earlier, the kids are going to mostly become like, you know, similar to their parents. And sometimes kids need parents who are showing emotions to welcome them into those emotions. So, say particularly for the sad thing, it's like we as a Western American culture do a very, very poor job, in my opinion, of grieving. Like, we just pretend things don't happen, or if someone's sad, we don't know what to do about it. We gotta, like, hurry up and make them happy right away and this kind of thing. But that's not, like, authentic to actual life. If you're grieving, then that means you wish things were better, but things are not always better, and, like, it's okay to be sad about that. And so sometimes I think there's room to, like, how I picture it in my head is, instead of saying, like, how do I need to be for the sake of the kid, I think, like, what's the right and healthy thing to do here that might welcome the kid also into that process or experience or feeling or whatever. You know, like, not that you want to go crazy and go in, like, a red-faced, you know, angry tear about things, but if things are upsetting, like, in a authentically upsetting way, like some injustice is happening, like, if you just pretend like you're not bothered by it, like, you know, what does that teach our kids? Like, if it's an actual unhealthy thing. Now, if it's like, you know, I didn't get my way, you know, there's a different thing there. But yeah, so I think I have this kind of, like, understanding, partly because I'm from Mifflin County, and I'm sure this is true in broader parts of the world, where it's like, guys, like, I need to be the solid rock that doesn't fall apart or doesn't, like, you know, do whatever for my family. But it's like, sometimes I think we are hindering more than helping in that kind of way.
You kind of touched on a lot of my questions, but I think both of us have a question regarding, like, discipline and what that looks like. I don't know if you want to share your Bible verses.
Yeah, I have a Bible verse.
Great.
So I've heard it before
Yep.
multiple times, and I just wanted to say it on the podcast, I guess. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Proverbs 13:24. So, what does that exactly mean?
God bless you guys. Ing, you got this one?
I can start. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you could replace the phrase "spare the rod" with just, like, some general form of, like, consequence and discipline. Like, don't spare your kid from getting corrected when they did something wrong, because you honestly will truly come to hate them, because, like, they will just become spoiled brats, you know. And Luke and I had this weird thing where I think it could be a whole longer discussion, which I honestly don't think is the most beneficial. It's like a whole thing of whether you spank or not spank, you know. And I feel like we tried all different options, and I feel like we spanked Odd, and probably should have spanked Enid. We didn't spank Enid, and, you know, we should have not spanked Odd, like, just based on their personalities. And Abe was kind of just, like, a very rare, if it really, really warranted it, but it rarely did. But we definitely correct and disciplined our children a whole lot. But I think it is true that my train of thought was that Luke and I remember that Audrey, every now and then, it would seem like she would just need, like, a good discipline, whether it be, like, verbal or just some consequence, and then it would, like, reset her for, like, weeks to, like, really try to listen and do good. Like, it was very funny, like, because she just so hated to be corrected and disappoint us, honestly, that that would really help. Like, she needed that discipline, like, reorient her to just be like, yeah, let me listen. Enid is a lot of it different, and we almost have to, like, under discipline her in a sense sometimes, so that we can make sure she hears what we do. But I think if you think about the kids who are, like, deemed ratty in society, I think you could say, like, yeah, those parents don't ever tell their kid they can't do that, you know? Yeah. Like, that's just how it is. Like, Jordan Peterson, who maybe Luke has brought up on the podcast, maybe not actually, but in any case, he has some, like, rule of life that basically says, like, don't raise your kid in such a way that you and other adults hate them, you know? Because if they're just a spoiled child who thinks anything they want they get, anything they do they can just do without any repercussions, then they're just not enjoyable to be around. And you see that in kids that are just the bullies, or the kids who talk back to teachers, or the kids in the classroom where you're just like, oh, are their parents involved in their lives at all? So I don't know, again, the emphasis on like spanking or not spanking in terms of sparing the rod, but I do agree with that like I think every kid though is very different in how you discipline. I guess that's what I wanted to say more concisely, that like all three of our kids, by nature, I guess nature and nurture of being mine and Luke's children, don't like to be corrected, and they do want to try to do the right thing, so that we're thankful, but that comes with its own problems. So it is tricky, because if anything, I think our kids have a problem getting disciplined. Like Abe especially will like fall apart, like just he'll say, I hate myself, and I remember she'd say, I'm such a bad person, and like Enid would get just so mad she'd leave, or like feel so like hurt and mad at herself, like they'd leave. So you have to kind of feel out your kid, because I think, thinking of my upbringing, I think my parents had like a kind of a one-way form of discipline for 4 different kids who needed something completely different. And you end up, if you discipline too harshly to someone who's sensitive, you end up just like killing them, like emotionally. And if you end up being too loosey-goosey on someone who's gonna really test everything, any limit they're gonna try to test, you're really doing a disservice to them too. So I think discipline is just like, know your kid and know like, do they lean on the people pleasing, or do they lean on testing the boundaries, and kind of adjust your discipline to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah. Different ways to say basically the same kinds of things that Ing is saying there. How I think about it is, for one, maybe in premarital counseling or whatever, I talk about this, like your spouse can't be your idol. Like it puts too much pressure on that person, and you can only interact with them best if you're like kind of focusing primarily on your relationship with God, which kind of gives you both the courage but also the grace to want the good of the other person. They don't have to become your savior. I think in a lot of cases what can happen with kids is that the kids become the savior, especially like, I just really wanted this kid, they're a precious little infant, they can do no wrong, and then like years and years of some of those kinds of things lead to this situation where parents are in a weird backwards way like bullied by the kid because they don't have the courage to stand up to their own child, which seems like it shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing. And I think that part of the reason of that thing is because the primary relationship should be with God, and that can help you to like want the good of the kid, but also not need the kid to always like you. Because if you need the kid to always like you, you're going to spare the rod, and you're going to spoil the kid, because you have to have their approval. Like it's like you need that kid to fill this emptiness inside of you that God, the way it should work is like the gospel through Christ fills that emptiness, and now you have something to offer good to the kid. While at the same time, you don't like, it's not you have the rod because like you're taking out your anger on the kid, or like you're just embarrassed. Like this is an issue that I see in some cases. Like people want to use physical punishment or just even significant punishment. The issue is actually that they're just embarrassed personally by the kid out of their own unhealth. And I need my kid to act up because I want other people to see me in a healthy way. But even still, in that instance, it's not actually for the good of the kid.
Yeah.
And so I think the best form of parenting a child is that you discipline them because you want their future to be good, and you're okay like with whatever perception other people have of that, because at the core, because of your healthy relationship with God, and this is all ideal, I'm not saying that I do this, but this is like the aim, at the core of your healthy relationship with God, you're okay to give to the goodness of that kid, whether that means kind of the comforting grace or the, hey, what you did was wrong. Like I'm not, you're not going to be able to do that kind of thing around here. Like that's unhealthy for you and brothers or whatever. So a lot of the same things Ingrid was getting at. It's just coming at the same thing from a different perspective. I think this is why, in healthy parenting, I think the gospel has a lot to offer, because I see in a lot of folks that I think would consider themselves really awesome parents without the gospel, it's really some form of oddly idolizing children, you know, which puts too much pressure on the kids. Just like in a marriage, it puts too much pressure. Like, a kid can't be your salvation, you know. Otherwise, you have nothing to give to that.
I thought of two other things. One is, especially for young parenting, that this was really helpful to me. I felt really terrible and convicted when I wish I would have learned it way sooner. So I want to share it, is that, like, be careful that you don't discipline your child or children for things that are annoying to you. That's what when Luke said something like, you just don't want to be embarrassed by your kid. I think I learned that a little, like, too late, and it was only when Abe was, like, more like 3 or 4, that somehow, I don't know if I read it in a book or how I came about that information, but it was like, try to reserve discipline for when your child is actually sinful and sinning and, like, purposefully missing the mark and doing wrong. Because if you discipline your child just because they're, like, annoying you, then that's gonna mess with them terribly. And I thought, oh my goodness, how many times did I, like, discipline them because they were being too loud? Like, being too loud isn't usually a sinful thing, because most of the time they were, like, happy, you know. It wasn't even like, or it wasn't even like a public place. It was just in our house, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you guys are being so loud, you know. Or I can't think about it right now because we're kind of out of those, like, early toddler baby years, but I know that I just have a lack of patience, and there were so many things that I feel like it just annoyed me about the kids, and I'm like, correct them and discipline them on it, even if it's just like nagging, nitpicking, corrective. And then they'd be like, "This, what's wrong with doing this thing?" And I'm like, "Oh, absolutely nothing. Actually, I'm just annoyed by it, you know." So, saving correction for sin is helpful. And then the other thing, what was I going to say? I thought 2 things. Oh, well, like, just getting to the root of it. I think, like, Luke and I overly communicate with our kids, I think. And I think a lot of times, even when they couldn't understand and, like, talk back to us, I remember, like, explaining, you know, to them, like, all right, here's what you did, and here's why there needs to be a discipline, and, you know, and then also, like, ask questions. Like, I feel like I constantly was like, why did you do this? Can you explain to me what your thinking was so I can figure out, because somewhere along the way, there usually was not, again, that, like, ill intent for them to, like, disobey me or break a rule or hurt their other sibling. Usually it was something that just looked like they were doing something bad, but in their mind they had a perfectly great reason, you know, and then you can kind of adapt. Again, the consequence won't be as severe. It will probably match what they did more fittingly. So, like, just getting to, like, the heart issue. I know Luke and I definitely have read books about that, of, you know, you want to always kind of bring it back to the gospel of, like, again, our kids would be the odd kids that felt terrible when they got corrected. So we'd be like, hey, God knew you were going to sin. Surprise! Like, not a surprise to him. Like, great news. You're not perfect just like everyone else, just like mommy, just like pa. And we're going to, like, help you to know next time, try not to do that, you know, and just, like, kind of overly, like, help them see what they were thinking and feeling, help you to, like, make sure that the consequence for what they were doing fits that problem. Like, Luke and I never did timeouts. I never felt like timeouting was, like, a fitting response to a kid sinning, of, like, separating them from you. I thought that spoke negatively, like, oh, when you do bad, you need to be separate from me, you know. I feel like it's like when they do bad that they most need to be with you, you know, like, not out of your view, not feeling, like, shamed and scolded and isolated. Like, they need to feel like your love after they mess up. So that was just, like, I could probably talk on and on and on about discipline, I guess, of, like, you just want to fit your discipline with what actually, like, helps a kid instead of just makes them feel terrible.
Yeah, I used to hate whenever the, like, adults around me would just say, like, if I was doing something and I'd say, well, why can't I do that? They'd say, because I said so.
Yeah, right.
I hated that. Like, tell me why.
Yeah.
What is actually wrong with that?
Yeah. It's like, now Fern has this podcast. And it's like, hey, let me ask really important questions to understand why things work the way they are. You know,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah, get an answer.
That's
yeah,
the
like
whole
finally,
root
you can,
of
like,
it.
yeah, right, yeah, that's what it is.
Honestly, Fern, that's probably why Luke and I were probably shaped by our children in that, because they very much ask you hear the toddler why. Oh my goodness, I feel like they were, especially Abraham, the king of, well, but you have to explain to me, why is what I was doing actually bad? You know, he wouldn't let us get away with not helping him see what was wrong with that. Because again, I think you can assume that kids are sinful and going to be sinful, but you can also assume that kids aren't going to be like, their goal in life is to not like drive their parent nuts, you know? That I think has to be created somehow, like along the way. Like I don't think kids want to like tantalize and drive us crazy, you know? So.
They find a way.
Yeah, I mean, they manage to do it naturally, of course, but I think don't assume, like, the worst of your kid. I think they truly want to figure out, like, they're learning in those first few years of life especially, like, they're learning the boundaries of life. Like, they're going to test them, of course, you know? And you just want to gently help them see, like, yeah, that wasn't really actually a good idea. Or, no, you can't actually do that. Sorry.
Sin is, like, it's not just, like, wrong in God's eyes to do. It's also like what's gonna create relational problems for you with yourself, or you with other people, or you with God. And so like, I think there's a certain vision that's like a sin-free life is like a religious prude who's no fun, who's whatever, and it's like the lie of Satan. The sin-free life is a life of like healthy relational flourishing, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's like when you correct kids or like, you're trying to point them towards a better future in that kind of way for their actual good.
It's kind of like flooding back to me now, like memories of like, I'm trying to picture like Audrey and Abram, especially like in the 2 and 3 and 4 years. And I felt like there was a mantra I said all the time, which is people are more important than things. And I felt like that was so effective compared to like a discipline for when they would prioritize, you know, basically fighting over toys. You know, how many times you hear like, oh, my kids can't share, or my kids, you know, want this thing that they can't have, and they take it from their sibling. And it's like, I guess that's where it comes back to like the root issue, talking through those things. Because if you can get them to see like, well, right now you care more about a tangible thing than you do about your sibling, and no matter what, Pa and I are going to teach you that in life, people are more important than things. Hurting your siblings' feelings is not worth having that toy, you know, for example. But so many fights would come back to just like a tangible thing, and you're just like, nope, I'm not, you know, better than discipline them for that. Teach them, oh, well, you actually shouldn't care more about having a toy than you should care about letting your sibling have a toy and have joy from that. So like teaching, I think like you save yourself a lot in the long run, in the 5 to 15 years of life, if you can like really just, what are some things you want your kids to believe in, and really just talk about them constantly to them before they can even talk themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I was also thinking for you two though, like incoming little baby is like one of the beautiful things about babies is that they can do no wrong. You know, they cry, there's a need, you know, that you get to meet. And I think you can form such a healthy and good bond by caring for a baby. Like there's a lot of research about that nowadays, kind of the effect of, you know, even, you know, in the womb, but also then, you know, first year of life, like how influential that is in people knowing that like as a baby I have a voice, and so when I cry, there's people here that want to care for me, and that just helps, you know. You might think, like, partly because a lot of the sin and correction and all that kind of stuff comes later on, but like there's good things you can do with a baby that are really helping in those issues by just being loving parents and surrounding your kid with a bunch of boatload of love, you know.
I think I'm gonna struggle more with like the people pleasing part, not wanting to be like spoil, or I want to spoil, not discipline. I don't know how you think. What you think?
I guess I don't know. I kind of just grew up in I feel like it was go to mom if you need emotional support. I mean, not that Dad didn't give me
Care,
emotional
yeah.
support or care, but I don't know, it just felt like that's kind of like how that was. So.
Yeah, and there's certainly individual differences between particular moms and dads and stuff like that. There's a lot of research now, and this is one of the reasons why I would argue that it's so crucial for kids to be raised with both parents. There's one of the oddly interesting things that I learned is that kids roughhousing with their dad is like super, super, super healthy. And the reason it's healthy is because dads can actually like help kids know the boundaries of like what turns to like unhealthy violence versus what is like fun in play when it comes specifically to roughhousing. And there's a lot of like further research then the kids who like do that with their dad, they become like I guess less violent. Like it's just weird. Roughhousing with dad as a young child becomes less violent as an adult. And so I think there's just like a component there. Or another perfect example is like risk taking. Dads are always more likely to let their kids do riskier things, i.e. go on a route. Moms are more cautious, and the tension between the mom and the dad in that relationship, when they're both parenting together and invested, is beneficial to the kids. Because a kid that's raised in a bubble, not good, but a kid who's let off the leash to do whatever they please all the time, also not good. And so like, there's just really a lot of goodness to that with both parents invested and performing their different kind of roles.
Yeah.
So I say go for that. That'll be good.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. It is always good if you have couples that are different in every area of life, but also with discipline, because then you can balance each other out and help. Because sometimes, like, basically, Fern, if you feel like you'll always kind of lean towards being less corrective, and maybe let's just assume Brody might be more disciplinarian, then it's like, if you're looking at every situation in that way, both of you together, then you can help each other see, like, well, what situations do need a little bit more of that just grace and gentleness, and what actually needs to be like, this is a problem, this needs a consequence, and this is, we can't overlook this, so it's like you can balance each other. So if you're similar, then there probably would be a lot of problems.
Yeah.
I know your kids are still fairly young.
And you've been around them some, Brody, see?
Yes.
It's like, you've seen these kids in their natural environment.
Right. So, I guess you guys are probably doing this now. Like, how can we stay away from overprotecting them from the
Great
world,
question.
or sheltering them? How can we stay away from that, but also making sure that they stay in good faith? Because I know that if you're overprotective, they can rebel. Then
Yeah.
they're more likely to rebel.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess something like that.
You're talking about like connecting kids having courage to just do anything in life, and then connecting it to,
Right.
well, then they ideally would have courage
Right.
to stand up for their faith. So
Yeah. It's also, again, like, I never know, Ing alluded to this, like, how much of this is just, like, our own idiosyncrasies and oddities
Like our
of our
kids.
family. Like,
Yeah.
we just, like, would prefer to be in the camp of weird, or
Mhm.
prefer to be, whatever, instead
perfectly
of...
fine to go against the grain and speak
Yeah.
out against things that aren't
Yeah.
popular, and so
Yeah.
our kids probably will mimic that.
So, yeah, it's hard to tell.
Your kids go to public school, right?
Mhm.
Correct, yeah.
I just was wondering, because we had
Yeah.
talked about some different things. Just,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like a difficult... related to what we just said, one of the reasons why we think it's valuable to send them to public school is the idea of living out your faith in a world where that's not like, the only option or that kind of thing. It's always a little bit complicated because like Ing and I both went to public school, so it's like, I'm always curious as to what % of people have their kids do the thing that they did versus change or that, so. And the way I lead at church, or try to lead at church, is like, we want to, I think there's probably more important things in parenting. Obviously, school choice matters, but like, I think for various reasons, for various particular individual kids, for various circumstances, for various, fundamentally, if the parents are invested, that still is going to matter more, I think, invested in the health and gospel understanding of kids. Like, I don't think it's healthy to send your kids to a Christian school because it's like, they'll handle the Christian part,
Yeah.
so that's good, like wash my hands of that deal of their life, and I'll just handle the rest. Like, that feels unauthentic to me, and I'm not saying people do that. I'm just saying if that were the reason, I wouldn't like that. Just like sending my kids to public school because there's their sports team or something. Like, it's not, it's not an ideal way to make that decision.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to work on the not having control over everything, or me and you were talking about that.
I wasn't gonna bring it up on the podcast because Brody and I had
Well,
that
you were
discussion
pointing
behind,
at me, I was
behind
like-
closed doors. But
But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I'm a kind of a control freak, and then I get frustrated whenever it doesn't go my way.
did we have that conversation before or after you knew about the baby?
I knew about it.
Because I said
you were
to
saying
you,
a lot about.
I was like, you
gonna have
need
to
to
work on it
spend-
before I have kids, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
he came home to me and he was like, and Luke doesn't know that
Right.
I'm about to have a kid.
right? But I remember one of the things I said to you that would be helpful was be around kids because they like force you to not be able to be in
Yeah.
control of everything. So it's like
that's fitting.
that like is actually happening. So that's great news.
Yeah. I think like we
yeah, I'm
both
gonna be a wreck.
we both worried, but like about completely different things.
Okay,
Like-
I can picture that.
Yeah, he's always like worried about I think dumb stuff, and he thinks I worry about dumb
Yeah.
stuff. Like he'll be worried about like we bought a rotisserie chicken from Walmart, and he's like, "Do you think that meat's done? Like, is it done?" And he's like constantly convincing himself to be sick. And I'm like, I ate it too, and I'm fine. You're not like, and I'm worried. Like I was worrying. Like this is just two examples this week, but I was just like, oh, I need to tell this friend and this friend on the same day that I'm pregnant, because if one of them finds out that I'm
they'll tell the other person
before the other person, then they're gonna be upset that I didn't tell this one first. And
Right.
so like and he's like, that is such a dumb thing to worry about. And I was like,
You
you think you have salmonella? Like,
A simple principle that might hold true, at least your example, it holds true, is that in general, guys are more focused on things and women are more focused on relationships. So I feel like that example said that. So maybe if you use that as a framework, if you use that as a framework there, it's like, okay, it's like Brody is worried. Is it about a thing? Oh yeah, that makes sense because he's a guy and he might be more worried about a thing than I am. Yeah.
it's funny. I was just telling him that the other day. Like, we worry about like
Right.
completely different things. Like, I wouldn't have thought of that, and he like doesn't even think of the stuff I think of.
I guess speaking of worries or just like thinking ahead into parenting, like what are you like most excited about or most like concerned about, or do you have things like that? Have you talked about that yet?
Well, I mean, I'm just excited. I want to see what our baby looks like. I
Yeah.
want to like. I mean, I had a little brother, so like I already know like some of the milestones that
What's your age difference again?
we're 17 years apart. So he'll be 7 when I have a baby.
Okay. Got it.
I don't know. I'm just excited to. I mean, I'm a little bit worried because I know that like. I wouldn't say worried, I guess, but I know it's challenging to like.
Yeah.
Like that's gonna completely rearrange what we know as life now, because we can get up and go and do as we please and all that.
One of the ways I think about like both marriage and babies is like they're just really great tools that God uses to help us be less selfish, so.
And I asked him the other night. I was like, "What is one of your biggest fears, like with the baby?" And I thought he was gonna be like the baby crying all night or something. He was like, "The baby choking." And I was like, "Why? Why would you say that? That's just like another fear of mine now."
He was just adding to.
I thought he was gonna say like crying. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just excited, I guess, to be the cool guy with a kid. I don't know.
Will you find out the baby's gender before it's born?
We've talked about it. I think we're going to.
Yeah.
It kind of drove me nuts when my mom wouldn't find out with Sully.
Got it.
Not that it would have mattered, but I was just like trying to picture in my head, like, am I
Yeah.
gonna be with a little brother or a little sister? And she wouldn't find out, so it
What?
kind of drove me nuts.
Do either of you have like predictions or guesses, or have you discussed?
I think it's a boy.
Yeah.
You think it's a boy?
I don't know. That's my intuition, but I don't know.
Maybe because we want a boy, I don't know.
I mean, I don't care either way. I just like the idea of having a boy first, but after that, I don't care.
Yeah.
Got it.
I like it because it's going to carry out the family name.
There you
One
go.
more generation, so.
There you
We have disagreements on how many kids, though.
go. Got
That's
it.
alright. That'll be real clear after you actually have one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel like.
Luke and I always said, "Oh, we're definitely gonna have 6 kids," and then my pregnancies were terrible, and then now we find ourselves exhausted. But fine, guess we probably won't.
Yeah.
After Eden, we were probably not. But
Hmm.
you'll know if you want. You'll kind of know after each one, not right away, but
Yeah.
come 1, 2, 3 years, oh yeah, I really want another kid, or I'm gonna have a sibling, and then
Yeah.
hopefully you'll feel a place of stopping, I guess. But
I don't know. I just, as we said at the beginning, super psyched for y'all, but I also just very much appreciate the humility of hey, we're gonna become parents. Let's not that Amy and I have the end all be all expert answers, but just y'all's posture towards it, which is not just for the podcast. I know this because I've known y'all for a while.
mm-hmm.
It's just hey, we want to do this with intention. We want to do it in a way that helps this kid to come into the world and help. It's just
Yeah, and
so
I think honestly,
hope-giving to me.
yeah, that made me think that I think you guys are set up for good success, because another thing that I think you should just keep doing, which it seems like you guys do, is observe parents and kids. I think
right.
Luke and I, again, so much of life, I guess, it's just who you are, and Luke and I obviously we're attracted to that parts of each other, in that we both have some pretty strong similarities. One of them also being we just constantly observe people, and I think even as a child, I was analyzing how my parents were raising me compared to my siblings, and I constantly was, even in high school and college before I had kids, thinking oh, let me observe that relationship, whether it was positive or negative, of mental note, don't do that with my kid, or mental note, that seems like a really great parenting tactic, and just constantly just kind of observe, because I think a lot of answers to parents are written in examples of yeah, clearly that person did well, let's mimic that. Or you can see how that almost collectively as a society, we're really stinking with technology, and okay, Luke and I were okay, this seems to be a huge problem, let's just not have a TV, as one way to just remove screens, from our kids. If all of society would agree screens are a problem and not recommended it until later in life, let's just not have our kids stare at screens all the time. So it's you can kind of make good decisions observing other people.
Yeah, for sure. Brody and I obviously look up to you guys. We think you're great parents, and I was gonna say that as part of the whole screen time thing. Your kids the other night when we were here, were entertained by a Bop It for an hour.
Right.
I don't know that kids do that anymore.
Yeah.
They want TV.
Yeah, they got a lot of issues, but one of the things
No,
is
that was
not
fun.
yeah, they can find crazy ways to entertain themselves
Yeah.
Yeah.
and me.
Creates a good imagination.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we'll have to work on too, I think, is just limiting our screen time as well, so that we're focused and intentional with our kid.
Yeah, I know somebody who they went off social media when they had a baby because what they said to me, which I thought was really profound, was I didn't want to reflect back on my child's first year of life and think of all the screens I looked at. I wanted to think of soaking it in with them. And I was just wow, that's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
better than me at that point in time.
Just general advice, oh man, the sleep deprivation stage of life it's rough, it's really hard, you'll feel extra angry, extra impatient, extra sad, extra overwhelmed, extra anxious, literally you'll feel you're on drugs or something.
It's encouraging.
And I mean, it's gonna be
Not
terrible.
that Amy experienced any of that.
I mean, that's why we don't have 6 kids, but no, watch your baby be great. I mean,
Right.
seriously, sometimes our babies were particularly terrible at crying and sleeping, but maybe it won't be that. There'll be some season, I guess, that you'll just be oh my gosh, this is why did we do this? This is terrible, Maybe it will come much later, but I guess just to try to keep a positive perspective, that I think I'm just encouraged, because I think less and less people are having kids, you know, and
Yeah.
because of that selfishness aspect, that it just rips your life from you. But I think my train of thought was just to say, like, try to find enjoyment in the hard times, or at least tell yourself, like, wow, these times are really hard, but in the end, like, you know, you're going to be able to just really enjoy given moments, given days, given years with your kids. And it's just like, I mean, even if you, as you think about, I oddly think a lot about just like later in life, you know, like you really are going to want to have like kids over your house for dinner, or for holidays. You're going to want to have grandkids, you know, you're going to want to have like just the legacy, like you said, Brody, of like your lives don't just stop now, you know, like you're carrying that on in your kids, and just try to enjoy them as much as you can, and don't just kind of see parenting as like a, well, I'm just gonna do this because that's what you do, you know, after you get married.
That's what I was trying to say earlier, when it was like a difference between like, at the end of the day, like, did I check off all the boxes of becoming a good parent, or was it like, hey, I really loved my kid and I wanted them to be like a great, awesome person, and I wanted to like just embrace and enjoy that time with them, you know?
Yeah, like
I feel like there's another level there that's like, you still need all the good parenting stuff to do that, but it's like sort of a different final goal, you know?
Yeah. Did you like this,
Towards
the word?
towards flourishing.
Yes, the words, like some words that couldn't matter, just, I was gonna say flourishing, but also just enjoy. I think I already said that. Like, just to truly, like, look forward to spending time with your kid, and like holding them and playing with them and crying with them, and, you know, just like try to just soak it up, because it is.
Yeah, because they grow up so fast. That's another thing I'm not looking forward to.
Everyone
Already,
will
I
say
haven't
that.
had the kid yet, and I don't want them to grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't believe, like, I look back at pictures of Sully, and I'm like,
Can't believe that.
when he was 2, he was so cute. I mean, he still is cute, but
No,
there's something
yeah,
about
it's
2
different.
years old that's
Yes.
just so cute.
Oh yeah. Yep.
There's also this another random Luke observational fact that I read about, is that generally speaking, which I think people would understand this, moms bond and like find the cutesiness and stuff of a little baby really, really like endearing, and they like fixate on that. Oftentimes dads like get more and more involved at like 2, 3, at like toddler age, doing stuff, wrestling around, all that kind of thing. And so Ing and I noticed that, where it was like, not that I wasn't involved with an infant, and not that she, you know, didn't do the same things, but it was kind of like there were some differences in kind of which parent was kind of more, a little more fixated at which age.
Yeah.
It was fun to observe. Got it? Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks, Brody. Thanks, Ing. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
So sad.
Yeah, as questions come in life, you don't have to be recorded. Just feel free to